Hello, my name is Grant Reeves. I'm a sophomore at the University of California, San Diego. And this is my Plague Diaries Volume 2. It's Thursday, October 22nd, 2020. So, I guess I just rewatched my last Plague Diary, and I talked a lot about kind of like the state of the election, which isn't really necessary because you can read about that, I guess. I'll still touch on it briefly, but I think I'll focus more on what's going on with me and what's the situation like for like a student with disabilities and a student athlete and things like that won't be as easily accessible, because obviously records of the election are going to be kept for forever, but that just won't be the case for these more niche issues. And so one of the things that I wanted to touch on more in this Plague Diary was like how mask wearing is so like it's such a hot button topic. Like, you wouldn't think that people would get so mad about masks, but it genuinely has become more of a virtue signaling thing than like an actual effectiveness thing. Like, it's really important to wear masks, yes, absolutely, and you should wear masks and you should social distance, but this like rabid belief that if you are within 6 feet of somebody for 30 seconds, you're both going to get COVID, even if you've been tested negative that week, which as athletes, we have to get tested every week, obviously, or every 2 weeks. And we get, and I've been negative every time, and my roommate has been negative every time. And I understand that it's more about the optics as well, because the student athletes need to represent the school well. But it's just frustrating because it seems like we're held to such an insane standard that like nobody really cares that the science, like what the science actually says. Like, there's people ignoring the science on one end of the spectrum that says, oh, well, you know, masks don't even help at all, so don't wear them and they don't matter. And then there's another end of the spectrum that's also not paying attention to the science that says, if you are not wearing your masks 24/7 and you are social distancing from your roommates and wearing your mask while you're like, our coach literally told us that we should probably be social distancing from each other and wearing our masks while we're in our own homes with our roommates. Like, I mean, these things, it's just ascientific and it's ridiculous. Like, that's the state of masks, I guess. That's a big one. That's a big one that makes life a lot more difficult, especially when you're like a student athlete and you're held to an extremely high standard. That makes life a lot more difficult on a daily basis. And so the next thing I guess that I wanted to touch on, so I have is like romance, whatever. I guess personally for me, romance in the time of plague is extremely difficult, of course. So my girlfriend, Tallulah Letcher, goes to the University of Washington in St. Louis, or Washington University, excuse me, in St. Louis, and she is now living with a bunch of her friends from there in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and that is 2,700 miles away from 2,700 miles away from San Diego. Which, you know, you'd think it wouldn't be too horrible when you can just get on a plane and go see them. But hey, guess what? During COVID, you can't just get on a plane and go see them, because you get on a plane and then you get there, and then I would have to social distance from them for 2 weeks to make sure that I didn't get COVID on the plane. And then I'd be able to see her. And then I would come back, and then I would have to social distance for like 2 more weeks so that I could actually swim and compete. And so you can't just fly over there for like a weekend and see your girlfriend. You would have to commit like a month or like 3 weeks at least, which is just obviously not viable, especially if you want to like stay in shape. So romance is difficult. I've gotten very good at FaceTime now. I used to hate FaceTime, but FaceTime is my new favorite thing. Yeah, so I just started working in a lab as well. Well, I mean, it was a couple weeks ago, but I didn't talk about it in the last one. So I've been working in a lab. I'm a neurobiology major, and I'm working in a lab that's doing research into the differences in gene expression in Purkinje cells and granular cells in the cerebellum. Basically, what I'm doing right now is just counting cells. Like, I'm counting cells, keeping track of what different types of cells are in different places, and to some extent, and it's not hyper intellectual work that I'm doing right now, but I'm also a sophomore, so I don't really have the capacity to do hyper intellectual work. Yeah, so it's just weird because I can't meet anybody from the lab. I've never actually seen anybody from the lab in person. I'm just doing everything through like a computer screen, and I'm quantifying and counting all these cells in like images that get sent to me. So I mean, it's difficult to actually feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself that's contributing to lab work when all you're doing is, you know, counting cells through your computer screen and then talking with other people in the lab occasionally through Zoom. So yeah. So yeah, what's the political environment like? I guess I'll touch on this briefly. It's heating up in the election. The election's now, it's the 22nd, so what? 12 days away? I don't know, I'm terrible at math. I'm a biology major. But the race is tightening, as it always does. A story that, like, Joe Biden might have accepted money illegally from people in, like, Ukraine through his son just broke. I don't really know what's going on with that. Honestly, I've been really busy with school, so I haven't really been paying that much attention to it, but it seems like that could be a big deal. But honestly, from my perspective, it seems like people already think that Trump is like the worst human being on the face of this planet Earth. It goes like Hitler, Donald Trump, literal Satan. Like, people basically think that Donald Trump is like the worst human being ever, and so the idea that Joe Biden's character is really going to get that questioned and that knocked by a possible connection to somebody in Ukraine is just, I mean, it's weird. I don't really think the story is going to change the election at all, but I guess we'll see. I guess you will know. So yeah, what's the social environment like? So people are starting to talk about what they're going to do for Halloween, which is next week, obviously, and I just think it's funny how everybody's so fanatical about mask wearing and being socially distanced, and then as soon as the coaches and the other people aren't around, then everybody's like, oh yeah, but I'm gonna go get trashed with 10 other people at this party this weekend. So that tells you what college life is like. Everybody is so worried about COVID until they decide they're gonna go get just smashed, which obviously as a student athlete I'm not doing anyway. But like, just got to be responsible. It's just frustrating when you're talking with other people and they're like, yeah, no, you really got to be careful, but this COVID thing is super serious. And then they're like, oh yeah, but I'm going to go get super drunk like later. Whatever. Anyway, I mean, I'm not really holding anything back in these vlogs. So like, whatever. The only people who are going to see this are going to be decades later and my professor. So we're okay. All right. That's vlog number 2. Sorry. Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.